When you're staring at a wall of blank screen and wondering whether a home theater projector is worth the hassle, the first thing that comes to mind is usually the fear of spending a lot of money only to end up with a dim picture that only works in a dark room. That hesitation is real, especially when you're also trying to juggle gaming, movies, and maybe the occasional sports night. I've spent the past few weeks setting up the Optoma HD28HDR in a typical living room that sees both daytime TV and late-night gaming, and I'm going to walk you through what that actually looks like, so you can decide if the value line up with your expectations. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the biggest question most people ask is, will this work in a room that isn't a dedicated home theater? The HD28HDR puts out 3,600 lumens, which is a solid amount for a 1080p projector that's trying to compete with a TV in a bright environment. In my apartment, the living room gets a decent amount of ambient light from a large window, but after pulling the curtains halfway, the image stays bright enough to see details without needing to crank the lamp to max. That's a practical win because you don't have to turn the whole space into a blackout cave every time you want to watch a film. Now, let's talk about the gaming side. The 120Hz refresh rate and 8.4 milliseconds response time are the specs that caught my eye, but the real test is whether motion looks smooth and input lag feels negligible. I hooked the projector up to a PlayStation 5 and a gaming PC, both running at 4K input. The projector still displays at 1080p, but it accepts the higher resolution signal. In fast-paced shooters and racing games, the motion stayed crisp, and I didn't notice any lag that would affect performance. The built-in enhanced gaming mode does a subtle thing. It slightly boosts brightness and reduces processing delay, which is helpful when you're trying to keep your focus on the action rather than the image quality. Movie night is where the HDR compatibility shows its worth. While the projector can't reach the peak brightness of a true HDR TV, it does a respectable job of expanding the image's dynamic range. In scenes with deep shadows, think a noir thriller, the blacks are noticeably richer than you'd get from a standard 1080p projector without HDR. The colors also feel more vibrant, especially when watching content that's mastered for HDR10. If you're the type who watches a lot of Netflix or Disney Plus in HDR, you'll appreciate that extra punch without needing a full-in 4K HDR projector, which often costs double. One of the hidden trade-offs you'll encounter is the lamp life. Optoma advertises a long-lasting lamp, and in practice, the lamp has held steady after around 50 hours of mixed usage, gaming, movies, and a few bright room presentations. The brightness hasn't dropped noticeably yet, which suggests you won't be swapping lamps every few months. That said, if you plan on running the projector for several hours a night, the lamp will eventually need replacement, and that's an extra cost you should factor into the total price. Speaking of price, the HD28HDR sits in the mid-range of home theater projectors. You're paying for a combination of decent brightness, HDR support, and a low response time, but you're not stepping into the premium arena where you get 4K native resolution and laser light sources. If you're looking for a projector that can serve as a primary TV replacement for a family room, the price-to performance ratio is solid. The value really comes from the flexibility. You can watch a 1080p Blu-ray, stream HDR content, or game at high frame rates, all from the same unit. Who should buy this? If you already own a decent sound system or plan to pair the projector with a soundbar, and you have a space where you can control the lighting to at least moderate levels, this is a strong candidate. It's also a good fit for gamers who don't want to sacrifice response time for a bigger picture. The ability to accept a 4K signal means you can future-proof your setup a little. Your console or PC can output at higher resolutions, and the projector will downscale cleanly. Who should skip it? If you're living in a very bright room with floor-to-ceiling windows and no way to dim the space, you might still end up fighting the ambient light despite the 3,600 lumens. Also, if you're a hardcore HDR enthusiast who wants the absolute brightest highlights and the deepest blacks, a true 4K HDR laser projector would deliver a more authentic experience, albeit at a much higher price point. Finally, if you're hoping for a plug-and-play TV replacement that you can leave on all day, remember that a lamp-based projector still has a warm-up period and will eventually need lamp maintenance. Practical strengths are the bright output that tolerates some ambient light, the low input lag that makes competitive gaming viable, and the HDR handling that adds depth to movies.